Hello, everybody. Welcome to another episode of the Thriving Adoptees podcast. Today, I'm delighted to be joined by Jude Hung, and Jude's going to be interviewing me today. Is,
Yay.
isn't that cool? Isn't that
Yeah, it's
cool?
kind of flip the script
Flip the script. Yeah.
with Simon Ben today. So I already have a title for for
Cool.
today's episode, and it is Healing Evolution. Maybe it's Simon's Healing Evolution. Uh, One thing you and I have talked about over our time of knowing each other is that journey. Like since you started the podcast with the focus on thriving adoptees and knowing the diamond that we are. You first had a focus on healing, the word healing, and then it's shifted and changed as you've interviewed over 500 people, not all adoptees, but over 500, mostly adoptees. And so I want to hear about that. So what did healing originally mean to you? And then what does it mean now? What's that shift?
Ooh, that's a big question.
Start with what did it originally mean as you started the podcast?
So
What was
thriving
it?
adoptees. I came up with a course, and it was going to be about thrive. So trauma informed healing, hope obsessed, resilience, identity, getting clear on identity, V, vision for the future, and E, empowering others. So it was, I've been thinking about that from both an adoptee perspective and an adopter perspective. So that's where Thrive came from.
Okay, so let's say it again, but a little slower. So thrive, T is trauma,
Yeah, trauma,
H,
healing, and hope.
healing,
Yeah, and hope. Yeah.
right?
R,
R,
resilience.
resilience,
I, identity. V,
identity,
vision for the future,
vision
vision,
for the future.
and
Yeah,
E, empowering others.
awesome. Okay.
So where I, that's where my focus for the podcast was Thrive. And then for the first, whatever that was, 2.5 years, it was Thrive. And then when I thought, well, why don't we just go to town on the healing thing? Um,
Right.
and we've done that for the last 8 months. And now I talk about different, does healing resonate with you? Because it doesn't resonate with others, and we get into it.
Yeah.
But what does it mean for me? I guess I've just become more aware uh, of the things that help us heal, the things that help us thrive. My language hopefully has become a little bit more fluid and fluent around that. How has it
Hmm.
helped? How has it helped me, the podcast? So in my own healing evolution, I would say middle of last year, I thought that I kept on hearing pre-verbal trauma, pre-verbal trauma. You've got to look at pre-verbal trauma. And so I'm looking at pre-verbal trauma. So I thought, yeah, okay, I'll start looking at pre-verbal trauma. Um, and I went back i- into doing some therapy, which I hadn't done for a while. Um, and I'm working on somatics at the moment, and it is bringing out a lot of grief that was hidden, really. Yeah.
Yeah. So you said a lot of good things. Thank you. So I'm going to go to healing and awareness first. So you started with this concept of thrive, and it sounds like it was we thrive if we heal, right? So focus on the healing.
No, it was
And then
just
you
we thrive. We thrive.
we
Yeah,
thrive.
thrive. So H was hope obsessed, and then it kind of became healing obsessed.
I
It's quite
see.
fluid.
Yeah.
It's quite fluid. Is
Yeah. It could be
is
both. Yeah.
it evolves? Yeah, on purpose.
Yeah. And then as you pursued your own awareness, your own continued healing and resolving. I always love that word, resolving our trauma. Uh, the pre-verbal. A lot of people on the show were coming and mentioning pre-verbal trauma. So you look into that and you went to a therapist. So, and then you did somatics. Were you finding that therapy wasn't able to really hit on the pre-verbal?
No, she stopped. She retired.
Ah, okay.
Right. So I was doing, I don't know, some EMDR type stuff and some somatic
Okay.
stuff. She was using different, she was using different things, different
I see.
modalities, and the and she said that. So she told me after a few sessions that she was thinking of retiring, um, but that she wouldn't leave me in the lurch. And then she left me in the lurch.
I was gonna say, what did that bring up for you, right? Here we are, adoptees, and we can be a little bit prone to
Yeah.
feeling abandoned.
Well, the she kind of threatened, almost threatened, with frozen on the video. So I'll just keep talking. So this people, some people might have heard this, but so the therapist said, as a condition for working with me, you need to stop listening to any other podcasts or reading books and stuff like that. So I
Mm,
did, right? I did that. And then she told me, she gave me started to tell me the same instructions again. And I just thought, well, you told me that the other week, and I've told you that I've put everything else on hold, and I'm just there for you. But I actually felt her in that moment that she was pulling away from me, and that made me scared.
yeah,
Yeah, that made me scared. So I told her that she was scaring me, to put it in simple terms. And we had a bit of better relationship from that. And then she told me a couple of weeks later, "Oh, okay, well, I'm thinking of retiring, but I won't leave you in the lurch." And then she did. Like, I had a session booked on the 4th of January, which is my birthday this year. And on the 3rd of January, she texted me, said, "It's been nice working with you, but I'm no longer able to do so." And that didn't cause me any upset at all. So the threat of her, resigning me as account or offboarding me, whatever, however you want to call it, ditching me, the thought of her doing that scared me. But when actually happened, when she did um,
yeah.
dump me, that didn't bother me. So I thought, oh well, I must have learned something in the therapy. So that's a good sign, right?
It's a good sign. It's a good sign. So, uh, you and I know, and you definitely know from interviewing adoptees, there are so many avenues now for us to release our trauma and work with people. We do have somatics. There's EMDR, there's EFT, there's talk therapy. Uh, which have you tried, and which has been the most beneficial for you? Or has it just been different things in different seasons? Like, what do
I've
you know?
done. I've not done a lot of any of these. So I did some talk therapy 10
Mhm.
years ago, and I had a meltdown in the chair, which is what you're supposed to do, apparently. Um, but that helped me. That kickstarted um, my search. My search for my birth mother, which was eventually a healing thing. So I did some talk. Then I did some EMDR last year with this woman that I thought worked at some level, and I'm doing the somatic stuff at this level. But I would say I've probably done less than 30 hours of therapy, but I've done probably thousands of hours of being coached or online courses about, or podcasts about consciousness, and yeah, and I've really gone to town on that. The coaching, group coaching, peer-to-peer
Hmm.
networking, all the stuff like that.
So, and we have that in common as well. And you mentioned awareness, right? Consciousness. What role has that played in your healing? And and because of that experience, what role or importance do you think that holds in our healing as individuals?
It's the difference that
Consciousness.
makes the difference. So the big course, the big starting point for diving into this sort of stuff was whatever it was, 15 years ago, 17 years ago, I can't remember. And the course was called Broadband Consciousness. So that has been the absolute foundation for me, understanding understanding ourselves as consciousness, understanding ourselves as awareness, understanding ourselves as the screen on which the movie of our life plays out, and where all our feelings are coming and going. What are they coming and going in? They're coming and going in us, us consciousness, me awareness, you awareness. Yeah.
So, how does that, maybe you can give me a great metaphor or something, how does that impact your healing, your sense of well-being?
So the big moment that I had probably 4 months after reading The Primal Wound was realizing that who we truly are, consciousness, is fundamentally unwoundable. Right. So this is the idea that what Dick Schwartz, the guy who created internal family systems, also known as parts work, what consciousness is what Dick Schwartz calls the uppercase S self. So the trauma is in the parts. The parts are the parts of us are transitory. The essence of who we are is continuous and everlasting, and is untouched by trauma, feelings, thoughts, events, anything.
So, from that point forward, would you say that you began, I'm going to use my language now, you began a process of differentiating who you are as that uppercase S self, your essence, and knowing your intrinsic worth and value, right? Like this unwoundable you, and differentiating it out from everything else that's not you, including that the trauma narrative, or what I call the trauma bound identity, because we get so wrapped up in that being us, we think it's us, right? Until we have this moment, this kind of aha light switch moment of, oh, that's not me, that's something that happened in the past, and it has influenced my life in all these ways. And it's uh there's a part of it in our nervous system that's still alive in my body, right? I get triggered and activated, and there it is again, and I'm seeing through a trauma lens, right? So was that the beginning of you differentiating between these two, and what has that journey been like?
So separating me from my feelings, separating me from my thoughts, that has been the trend for the last 15, 17 years, right? Separating me from the voice in my head.
Yes.
And then separating me from my trauma, I would say, has been the last 8 years.
Mhm.
And it's not just the separation of who we are from our trauma. It's the knowledge of what that self is like. It's the qualities of that self. So the uppercase S self, um, or consciousness or awareness, that is free from trauma, and free from trauma equals peace.
Yes.
So it's a
So,
peace.
so
It's a peaceful. It's a peaceful, open space. It's space for our uh, trauma to be triggered and then and then subside. So it's not grabbing. It's an open space. It is a space that is open for our trauma, not hard grip, not holding on to our trauma.
mhm, mhm, yeah,
So it's the space that allows us to we're walking along we're walking along whatever we're doing. We're going through life. We're going on a dog walk. We're walking down the street. We're on the sidewalk, whatever you guys call it, right? And then and there is a there is peace, right? I am peaceful, and then I am triggered, and then I go back to peace. So it's the reversion, as the reverting to peace, um, more quickly than I have in the past. So
yes,
it's not falling quite as far. It's not falling down for quite as long, and it's bouncing back quicker. But it's
yeah,
not a place in which I am never triggered. It's about being less bothered about being triggered.
right. Yeah, it happens less often,
Less
right?
often.
And I think when, in my experience, when I'm, because I've had a similar journey, when I'm activated in my nervous system, and it does, it less often, less long, right? Because I'm not identifying with that any longer. So it moves through my body, you know, and I'm, because of the consciousness piece, I'm more of the observer of it, right? I'm witnessing it happen. I know it's happening. I feel it in my body, but it's not who I am. And I can be curious about it, or I can just kind of let it go, and I also have my toolbox, right, of things to do. Um, So I think that it causes that consciousness piece almost causes a little bit of like space, like you were talking about that openness, a buffer. It's like, because I'm not identifying with it and then spiraling down along. Is that
So it makes trauma less traumatic, right?
makes
So
trauma less traumatic?
I'm last last Tuesday I'm with the somatic lady, somatic
Hmm.
experiencer lady, Blanche. Blanche, she's called, and she. I'm sat in a chair, and
Hmm.
and she's saying, get comfy in the chair, and I'm not feeling comfy in the chair. So then I sit down on a different chair, a lot closer to the floor, and I'm feeling supported by the floor, and then we're diving into the session, and I'm bringing this big grief stuff is coming up for me, loss. So I'm stitching together the loss of my birth mother, the loss of my granddad when I was 7, the loss of a chinchilla about 10 years ago, and the loss of my, well, no, a bit more than that, and the loss of my best friend 24 years ago who died in a car crash, right? So I'm stitching all those things together, and I'm being overwhelmed by the grief, But instead of pushing the grief away, she's encouraging me to bring it in. So by bringing it in, but it's like keep your friends, what they say, keep your friends close, but your enemies closer. It's like
Closer. Yeah.
it's like bringing in what grief, which would have been normally previously seen as the enemy, that grief
Hmm.
thing, right? And bringing it in. I've also been doing, I did a grief course with Pamela Karanova as well. Did that over the
Yeah.
last couple of months. So I've been looking at grief, and not much grief has come up. That it not much has come up during
Yeah.
that, but that that and the somatics combined, I think,
Yes.
brought together for the thing. Brought together. I don't think I would have put all those different things together. So
Yeah.
I I have no I have a picture, right? I have a picture of me lying on my bed when I'm 7, sobbing and telling my teddy bear that my granddad has died, right? And then and I've got a picture, fast forward like 40 years, I've got a picture of me taking the call, talking to my friend's wife, who tells me she is now a widow, right? I've got a picture of that, but I've not got a picture of 5-week-old Simon saying goodbye to birth mum, Pat. I have,
Yeah.
but I've had a big breakdown to breakthrough moment
Hmm.
with her, and I didn't really, I didn't really think that there was much left there. But I'm a little bit confused now. So I don't know. I get very upset around this death of this friend, Matthew, which was 2000, so it's 24 years ago. And
Yeah.
I think that that's an echo. I think that that's an echo of grief, um, grief from Pat. But it's
Yeah.
grief, whatever it is, it's still there. Um, so it's coming up, and it's
Right.
coming up, and we're bringing it into it. That's the whole. And what we
It's,
resist,
yeah.
what we resist persists. Oh, sorry, what we resist persists. So this is about bringing it in, and that's what the
Mhm.
somatic lady. That's what Blanche told me to do. Bring it in. Sit with it.
Yeah.
Sit with it,
Sit
rather than
with
trying
it.
to
Yeah.
fend it off. Right.
Yeah. Yeah. I used to envision like my grief, my pain, the fear, the things that were my nemesis, as I call them, and I'd want to like fight them, like fighting off a dragon, with like my sword. And then I learned like you invite your dragon to tea, you befriend it, because these are parts of us that need to be seen, heard, witnessed. That's that conscious piece, and expressed and released, right? Like so that they're not staying stuck in our body. And um, the grief one for me personally was always so big. I thought, oh, if I let it out, I'm just gonna cry forever. It felt so big. And two, for my infant grief, I had no mental pictures. I've told you before, like it was dark and shadowy, and it was just this enormous feelings, enormous terror and grief and loss. Uh, and it's interesting because I'll feel like it's all gone and then a little piece will come up. But I have cried more tears than I can count, and I'm so much later now. And so yeah, it's an interesting journey for sure. Um, one thing that I know is in your heart to do, and well, let me take it a step back. So, how has this transition from when you began the podcast with this concept of thriving adoptees and now? you have definitely had a shift in your perspective happen through all of these interviews around languaging, right? Around story, around all these things that we're hitting on. What has that shift, like, how has that impacted you personally?
Well, I've realized that um, I was far luckier with my adoptive parents than a lot of others.
Mm.
Right. So,
Yeah, can you explain?
so yeah. Well, you don't. I didn't have a comparison before, um, and now I have a comparison. I can see that I got lucky with with my adoptive parents. A lot luckier than most. Like, yeah.
Yeah, that's a good thing to realize. And um, also, I know through doing the podcast, two things have really come through for you, and one is that E piece, wanting to empower others and guide them in their journeys and lead them, and the other is language. Maybe you can share a little of your history with language and why why it's so important. But you and I have talked about just needing to shift the languaging in our community, and kind of have a cohesive language, and the importance of that. Can you share a little around that?
So somebody recommended. I saw the. Well, first off, leadership isn't creating followers; it's creating more leaders. I heard that, and that I think that really works, right? So, um, I saw somebody talking about the podcast and saying that they like my positive approach. Well, it's only because I know that we're not our trauma,
Yeah,
and it's only because I know that what we focus on gets bigger. So if we focus on the when I focus on the positive, I feel better. So that's the only reason. I'm not trying to gild the lily. It's about being intentionally focused on thriving. The world has become trauma obsessed, and
yeah,
as adoptees, we're trauma. We don't need to be trauma informed. People talk about trauma informed education, trauma informed teaching. Well, we're trauma experienced, right? But
yeah.
let's be trauma experienced. But let's be healing obsessed. Let's be hope obsessed. Let's focus on growth and transformation, and let's move it on. That I think that's part of the thing about,
Mhm.
because I've had so much coaching. Coaching is always about the future, whereas therapy is about the present or the past.
One thing that you and I worked on together was growth and transformation, and that came through your research around healing and shifting that word, right? Because we can become healing obsessed, but that still keeps us tied to trauma very often, right? And yet all humans are always growing and evolving, right? We're always transforming. So was that like, is that kind of a conscious choice of empowerment, like coming into, right? Because into
Well,
growth and transformation?
it was trying something different. So somebody said they didn't like the word healing. So,
Hmm.
okay, well, what we're going to call it instead? So I'm healing is the word that still resonates for many people. So yes, um, but I'm not quite as hung up on the language. But what the big realization that I had was 8 years ago was that who we truly are is fundamentally unwoundable. So if there's no wound, there's nothing to heal, right? There's nothing wrong with the essence of us. And this idea that our essence is hidden and not harmed, and the thing I came up with, the rock, paper, scissors metaphor, the idea that we're the rock, the scissors in the game, rock beats scissors because scissors can't cut rock. Nobody's denying the trauma. I'm just saying the trauma isn't the scissors, it's the paper. And the
Right.
paper, the paper wins in the game, but when we unfurl, when we unfold the paper to reveal the essence of who we truly are, then we see that the paper hasn't harmed. Our trauma hasn't helped harm the essence of us. It has only hidden it. We've been concealed in this. We've been
Very much
concealed
so.
by the trauma. The
Yeah, and
trauma-bound identity, you call it. Yeah.
trauma-bound identity, right? Because our identity gets bound up with this traumatic event and the narratives and the beliefs that become the way we're choosing to move in the world and see ourselves as a result. Uh, you know, and honestly, as I'm sitting here listening to you, it's like ding, we that little aha, and I've had this before. I know this is true, but as we cling to that narrative, we cause our own prolonged suffering. And I do believe that we can grow and heal and resolve our trauma with more ease and grace.
So
Uh,
we're not choosing. I When we say we're causing our own trauma, that's not
Not causing our trauma. I
we're
didn't,
we're
not
we're, we're,
causing,
we're causing our own. We're prolonging. We're
we're
prolonging our suffering.
prolonging
Well, it's
our
not. We're
suffering.
not doing that on purpose.
Not on purpose. Heck no, hell no,
The
not on
conditioning,
purpose.
the conditioning.
It's,
Yeah, it's
it's,
become a
yeah,
habit.
yeah, it's our default programming, really, right? Because especially in the case of adoption, we are children, infants, when this is happening. So the state of our brain is working in like a hypnotic state, and anything between like 0 and 7 becomes our default unconscious programming. And so this is very unconscious. This is not, as you say. And so that consciousness piece is so key, right? Because we're taking what is unconscious, making it conscious, then we can step into our power. We can be empowered and change our choices, change our patterns. And we can choose a path that is filled with more ease and grace and peace. Like you said, we can begin to identify more and more with who we really are, the uppercase self, and make better choices and have less suffering in our lives.
Consciousness, identifying as consciousness, identifying as uppercase S self. And if you're interested in this, readers, then read the book, right? No Bad Parts by Dick Schwartz.
Yeah.
We are identifying that way gives us more choices. It means we're choosing more of the time, not all of the time, but more of the
More
time.
of the time. And it's a practice, right? It's a practice. It's been a practice for you. It's been a practice
It's
for
a
me.
practice for me,
And
yeah. So that
yeah,
broadband consciousness course that I did, and I'll put the links in the show notes, right? If I remember.
yeah,
Um, the, the there's a book on Amazon by the lady who ran that course with her now husband, broadband consciousness course, and it's called "It's Not Your Fault Because You're Not Choosing." right?
Yeah.
So it takes the sting out of it. It allows us to give ourselves more grace. So let me put it in, in really simple terms. We use this word, this word is used in a lot. This phrase is used a lot in society. I'm getting in my own way.
Mm.
What's getting in your way? Well, I am. No, no, you're not getting in your own way. And it's one of these words that's used all the time, phrases, but it's not true. It's just not true. It's not you you can't get in your own way.
Yeah. Yeah.
Have you tried to do that physically? Right? You're walking
Yeah.
down, you're walking down the pavement, as we would call it, the sidewalk, as you would call it. Can you get in your own way? Right. So you jump 180 degrees, then you jump, you can't get in your own way. It's just impossible. What is getting in the way is a thought or a belief.
Mhm.
And you're not your
Exactly.
thoughts and you're not your beliefs. So it's not you getting in your own way. It's not us getting in our way. It's a
Yeah.
thought or it's a belief that is stopping us doing something. It's something from our conditioning, right?
Yeah.
It's something
Yeah.
from our programming. It's a bit of programming. It's a bit of conditioning. It's a thought. It's a belief. It's one of those things. It's not you. It's not us getting in our own ways.
Right. We have that judge, that's like, you're doing this, you're doing that, that critic.
Yeah.
And when we begin to really hook into this belief that we're talking about, that begins to fall away as well, because we know that it's this, unconscious beliefs and programming. And the beauty of, I would say, life and the human body is that what is unconscious, when we are ready and able to see it so that it can be resolved, comes to the surface for us to see it. And so there's this always kind of, that's why I like growth and transformation. There's always continual unfolding of the unconscious coming up to be seen, right? These old stories to be heard. For me, coming out of the fog is one of these unconscious, becoming conscious moments that many of us can relate to. And that moment didn't come until I was ready to handle all of the grief, the pain, that story, so that I could voice it and tell my story and talk to my family, about all of these dynamics. Before then, I couldn't have handled it. If I could have handled it, it would come up for me to see. And so we can go more gently with ourselves. But it's that conscious piece that really shifts how we move in the world and how we relate to ourselves and relate to our trauma.
Yeah.
Yeah.
So one of the big things last year was because I've been talking about this fundamentally unwoundable stuff, and people think I'm nuts, right? So I will say healing. When I think of healing, I think of
Mhm.
two perspectives. So psychologically, we'll be healing forever, but fundamentally, we were never wounded. So I'm separating the stone from the paper in rock, paper, scissors. I'm separating who we are from the trauma that we feel, the trauma that's embodied. People talk about it being embodied, and I'm opening the gap between who we are and how we feel.
Yeah. And I think the languaging piece is really important. Like, if people can really begin to feel into fundamentally unwoundable, right? Their intrinsic worth and essence. Those were the words I was using when you and I first met. And I love fundamentally unwoundable. It's so strong and clear. And one of the things that you've worked on and I've worked on is that languaging piece, because we know that it provides a construct a roadmap. It begins to build that a little bit of structure that people can follow and go, I, feel into the meaning of it in their own body, right? What does it mean if I'm fundamentally unwoundable? And I really like growth and transformation because healing forever, a wound shouldn't be healing forever. A wound should, right? Like it doesn't do that. But growing and transforming, that evolving, that seems this ongoing process,
Yeah.
right? Yeah.
So the transformation is beyond form, right? So we're saying that we're not our body, right? It's
We are temporarily
beyond
this
form.
body, right?
Well, yeah, but essentially,
Because we
right?
are this
Essentially,
body.
fundamentally, like this.
Oh, yeah. Fundamentally, we're not this body. Yes, I
Yes.
understand what you're saying.
Right.
Sorry. Yeah.
Yeah, but it's one of those things. So beyond form and this, I haven't used it a lot recently, but this idea that we're not human beings having a spiritual experience, we're spiritual beings having a human experience, right? So the
Yes.
spiritual being is the uppercase S self. That's the
Yes.
unwoundable bit, and the trauma is in the human experiencing. So it's depending where
Yes.
we put an identifier, right? And I was thinking about this last night. It's like so for me, it happened in one big bump, right? Fundamentally unwoundable. But if that came to me, but that might not be the way it comes to every people. So I think
Very true.
there's I came up with this phrase: seeing our own wholeness, right? Seeing our own wholeness, and that might start with um, somebody, us hearing somebody say that we are whole, right? And then we get curious, and we suspect that we may be whole.
Hmm.
And then we do a bit
Yes.
more digging. We listen to Dick Schwartz or somebody else like that.
Yeah.
We listen to somebody that's talking about consciousness, or listen to another podcast from Thriving Up Teeth, and we see that we are whole. And then after that, we might feel whole. And then after that, we know we're whole. So it's kind
Yes.
of that that journey, that growth and transformation is about our wholeness, but it might happen in fits and starts. There might be points along the way.
Yeah.
And we're the
It's a
whole,
journey.
right? We're whole, and that means all of us. That means the bringing in the grief, like I was doing with
Mhm.
Blatch last
Yes.
week, right? I'm whole. I am
Yeah. Bring it
bringing
home.
in. I'm bringing the whole of my emotions. I'm integrating everything rather than trying
Mhm.
to push it away. And back to Pamela Karanova, right? Her interview with the Thriving Doctors podcast, she talked about 26 years of a 26-year-old relationship with alcohol, which was all about numbing. So numbing is pushing
Right.
trauma away, pushing it away.
Yeah.
And and we do that because it feels like we're going to drown in our tears, right?
Yeah. I think for adoptees specifically, because of when our trauma happened and we invoked the, survival mechanisms of fight, flight, freeze, and fawn, it is so overwhelming to our infant self and body, right? That's why that we need there's so much addiction and numbing because it's if that as an adult it would be heartbreaking and difficult enough for that loss, but as a child, that stage of our growth and development, it just fries our systems, right? Like, so I think
but
that
we
that's
but
why.
we don't know how we have no idea how I think I was thinking a lot about this last couple of weeks, right? We could, because we have no conscious memory of it, we could our creativity could make that a lot worse than it was. We're never
Could.
going to know. We're never going to be able to
Yeah.
say
Well,
I overestimated my trauma or
mhm.
I underestimated my trauma. We're never
Right.
gonna get, I don't think we're ever gonna get
Well,
a real a real take on how bad it was for us.
but for me, I have because of the shamanic work that I've done and during EFT with Gwen Orweiler, shout out, uh, right? And that is emotional freedom technique. And she was through that able to bring me to the pre-verbal memories and actually even through a hypnosis, pre-verbal memories. And that I felt terror and I felt like I was going to die. Like, so I do have like a reference point to what I felt in my body, but I have no visual memory, only feeling, only emotion. Like, and it's very raw and it's very primal and archaic. Like, it's very basic. And it took me many sessions to even be able to put words to what I was feeling.
Okay, so I've
So
had
that's for
had
me,
that
that's
then.
my experience.
I,
Yeah. But
I
but
haven't.
we don't know,
We don't
right? We
know.
don't know.
So
Yeah.
so let me, as you say that now, I can see the meltdown in the therapist chair as the same thing.
Yeah.
I I froze I froze with terror and then I burnt alive with anger
So yeah, so it was yeah.
in the therapist chair
Yeah.
like 10 years or so ago.
My body just chilled over that. Yeah. We were talking about so aha moment, right? You had this aha of fundamentally unwoundable.
Because I'd been studying consciousness
Yes.
like
Right. And
listening to 2 hours a day, an hour and a
right,
half
yeah.
walking the dog, listening to a podcast, listening to stuff about consciousness, half an hour
Yeah.
in the car every day, right, for the
Yeah.
last
Yeah.
13 years. So like
Yeah. And I was gonna say, but it still takes time, right? To because we have to build a relationship with that part of ourselves. We have to building a relationship means building connections. And the trauma often it buffers our connections, right? So it takes time to know the qualities, like you said, of our uppercase self and getting to know it and then getting to know and it's like, oh, that piece of me is whole. And I love the word wholeness. I use that a lot. And for me personally, I feel like my adoptee wound is healed and that I am whole. That does not mean that I don't have activations and triggers in my body, but the narrative around that is done for me. And I
it's
have a
about being
felt,
okay with not feeling okay. It's the
yeah,
difference
there's an
between
acceptance of it all. My relationship with it is good. I'm whole.
it's like feeling not okay. Right?
Mhm.
It's like
And now I'm
feeling
okay.
not okay doesn't make me not okay. It's the difference between my okayness is separated from my feelings. It's like
Yeah,
I'm more interested in who I am than how I feel. I'm less
yeah,
bothered about how I feel. I'm not triggered about being triggered. I'm not as worried about
no,
being worried. I'm not as angry about being angry. It's like
yeah.
it's more
It's
peace.
a full acceptance, right, of this lived experience as an adoptee for me. Like I don't feel there's anything left to resolve around it. I'm good. And
I
I've
don't think I'm
also,
fully accepting my feelings. I think I'm just not less. I'm less bothered about my feelings than I used to be. But I don't think
yeah, I
I
don't have
still
any
get.
bad feelings around it. Like, um, and so that journey is a sensory journey, and we're building these connections. And so what we're working on is a felt sense of safety, felt sense of belonging, and a felt sense of wholeness, loving ourselves, like, and really feeling it in our body. That, like you talked about, the integration part, embodying the truth. Uh, Clarissa Estes, Pincola Estes, she wrote Women Who Runs with the Wolves. And there's a story in there that she tells about this woman who goes and finds the bones. And she gathers the bones and she lays them out and places them in the right structure. And then she sings over the bones. She's pouring her soul and singing over the bones. So a lot of, think of like nurture and care. And she sings them back to life. And it's a wolf and it runs, and she
Wow.
runs with this wolf. And that's really the journey that we're on. And that's what I collected, all my bones and my parts so that I could feel whole. And I poured my soul into it. And what's interesting is I knew this story, and as I was coming into this felt sense of wholeness, which was really just this spring, as you know, I broke my wrist. And then once it was all mended, right? Like, because the bone has to mend and weave back together, that story came to mind. And it was like, that's what you were doing all these years, is, bringing your pieces back and singing over them and being able to tell this story and bring yourself back to wholeness and love. And that's what we're doing, and very consciously. And I think the conscious piece has made all the difference for me as well. Uh, because I think before it was kind of like this willy-nilly. I'm like up in the branches and I'm looking, oh, I got to heal this over here and heal this over there. And once I got to the root, I could consciously, um, there's a quote about like kissing yourself up, like from the root, and I kissed all my wounds, you know, and I loved them all, and called it all home, and felt I can feel
Yeah.
whole now, and I can move on to other things. I
And
can create
that's,
other
the
things. Yeah.
big, one of the big learns from last year is that um, this is about consciousness, um, far more
Yeah.
about consciousness than it is about psychology for me. That
Yes,
it,
absolutely. I agree.
it's about who we are, not how we think or how we feel. It's about who we are.
Right.
It's the essence. It's that the chi or whatever.
It is. Getting to know that part of ourselves, and that creates such a huge shift in how we interact with reality and view the world and view our wounds.
And so many of us
Yeah.
have have focused on the psychology, and it's not done anything for us. We've done the talk therapy, and talk therapy can't heal pre-verbal trauma because we don't have words for it.
It's yeah, it supports us, right? It's supportive, but it's a really long road around.
Yeah.
It's, yeah, because I did therapy too. I've done all the things.
But I mean, if I'm now, like, I would have gone straight. I would have gone to somatic earlier. I think. No, I don't think I know if I.
Yeah, it
But there's
just
not so many somatic people around, right? So I have to
it,
drive an hour
it's
and a half.
it's
But
still pretty new. When I took massage in when I went to school, right? Because I did it for 11 years. When I took massage in 2010, somatics was just becoming a thing. Like they mentioned it in school and they're like, this is somatic work. And they talked about it, and we spent some time learning a little, but it was really kind of almost cutting edge at that point. And this is 15 years later, right? So um, and we're still learning.
the
And I
Bessel
think,
van der Kolk book didn't come out till 2014. The Body Keeps the Score did not come out, so it's been out 10 years, right?
yeah, yeah, I read that when it came out and didn't know I had trauma. It's hilarious, but yeah. So all of it was really cutting edge, right? And it's still. it's still in its infancy, our understanding, because there's a lot of energetic understanding also that around all of this that we're just starting to hit on and understand. So yeah. Um, so where's all this leading you to, Simon? Your this journey that you've been on through the podcast, because now you're teaching.
Well, it's to more teaching, it's to more sharing and more thriving, hopefully.
Yeah. This all went well. The way that you hope is your, I believe your goal is impact, right? Like really creating an impact of or a ripple of healing and growth and transformation in the adoptee community and
Yeah,
constellation.
in the constellation. Yeah. So adoptees and adoptive parents. Some podcasters, adoption podcasters, adoptee podcasters, don't want to do stuff with adoptive parents. I'm like, why the hell not?
I agree. I think if our aim is healthy, whole, that would mean the relationship dynamics as well. And I don't think that unless I think it would need to include all the parts of that
Yeah.
triad, you know. Yeah.
And the adoptee and adoption professionals, right? So I talk to adoption
Yes.
professionals and they don't know what coming out of the fog means.
Wow. Yeah. And yeah, it's something we use all the time. And I think that too, because with the adoptive professionals is wise because it's kind of like backdoor advocacy, right? So if we want to create change, we have to have these healthy lines of communication and understanding and be able to sit at a table together. So yeah,
Sure.
that's beautiful. Yeah. Well, thank you for all of your work and for inviting me here to chat with you today. I appreciate it.
Thank you. Thank you for
Yeah.
answering the call. Yeah.
Yeah.
Thank you, listeners. We'll speak to you very soon. Watch out for stuff. Me and Jude are up for a lot of stuff. So watch out. Get
All
on
right.
Eventbrite and see what we do. Speak to you very soon. Take care. Bye bye.